So then if you take the principles of AI and then say becoming a person of influence on social media, how do you see that quote unquote market changing in terms of maybe using AI to manipulate that world, and even the point we're getting to with like fake creators who aren't even a real person?
I think that something interesting just happened a week ago, which was there was a turning point in the presidential campaign. Now, right now, when we're recording this, we don't know who's won, right? US presidential election.
Hopefully Trump, in my opinion.
Right? Yeah, right? So we don't know who's won. It could go either way. We've seen the campaign. So we're recording this the day before the election. But there was a real turning point. Actually, it was on both sides. Kamala did a podcast, Call Her Daddy, and Trump and Vance did Joe Rogan. 3-hour podcasts, 2-hour podcasts. Why is that so important that they did that? Because people really crave the authenticity. They want to know, what are you like when you're unfiltered? We sit there and we say, okay, I really don't care about sound bites anymore because I know that they can be manipulated. I don't care about those well-edited clips. I know those can be manipulated. I don't care about highly produced will.i.am songs because that can be manipulated. I don't care about speeches from the stadium, from the podium, because that can be scripted by someone else and manipulated. What I care about is seeing you sitting down with a podcaster and having a 2 or 3 hour conversation where we just talk about life and liberty and happiness and, you know, all of those sorts of things. And it's very, very hard to fake or filter that. Now, why has that become such an important media? It's because of AI. So because we can create fake stuff, people are now gravitating towards real stuff. There are very few formats that are possible to fake. That are impossible to fake. And the long podcast is now an impossible to fake one. I think the long form podcast is going to become one of the most important formats in the next 5 years. And I think what you'll see is almost every CEO of every major company prioritizing being on a long form podcast.
And is that from a personal branding point of view from their own perspective, or also to try and get across their company's message to maybe shareholders to listen to and even employees?
Yeah, well, employees definitely. I think there's a certain age of employee that has to have that connection to the founder or to the CEO, and it has to be authentic. It has to be like, I've seen them on a podcast. I know that they're a good fit. There's good chemistry there. I think it's the personal brand. We've now entered an era where personal brand, especially of the leader, was like a weird thing. First, it was weird to have. Like a few weird people had it, like Steve Jobs.
That's the first person I thought of,
yeah. And then like, okay, a few people are doing it. Steve Jobs, Elon Musk, probably still in the weird camp. But then it's like, okay, now I'm seeing Tim Cook on a stage. Okay, it's transferable. I'm seeing some other CEOs going out there and having conversations and being unfiltered. Jamie Dimon especially is now often on podcasts and often on, you know, long form content. So we're starting to see those sorts of things. And it's the moment that there's always a tipping point where things go from being weird to being acceptable to being essential. So we saw this with Franklin Roosevelt. He did the fireside chat with his presidential campaign in the 30s, and that was all about being on radio. And up until that point, presidents had never been on radio. It was all print. So the only way you knew about a presidential campaign was what was written in the newspaper. Then he just does a fireside chat, completely revolutionary, and then all presidential candidates went on radio. And then 1960, Nixon versus JFK, and it was a televised debate, and it was about having television and seeing what they look like and seeing how they perform on that thing. And then fast forward to Obama 2008, it was about interaction on social media and having a social media presence, and that was completely unheard of up until that point, and then it became normalized. And then the big one in 2016 was about personalization and using data. Trump and Brexit were both data-driven campaigns. So then data became the biggest thing from 2016 till now. And then this campaign, the big emerging trend that has come off of the back of this one is the long form 2 to 3 hour podcast.
It's interesting for two reasons. One, I listened to Joe Rogan podcast the other day. I was listening to the Elon Musk Joe Rogan one on the way
this
here.
Morning?
Actually.
Yeah,
I was listening on the way here. And when I was listening to the Joe Rogan Donald Trump one, I was like, this is fucking gold.
Yeah.
Like, if you want Trump to do well, and you see how many views and how much watch time it has, what I think is also wild is how people can see how these platforms are being manipulated. So, for example, I clocked on it straight away. I think the day after the Donald Trump Joe Rogan podcast came up, I searched on YouTube to watch it. It's like clip. It's not there. The one that's got like 40 million views, that's 3 hours long. I had to go onto his channel to go and find it because Google had like hidden it, so it wasn't showing up.
Wild, isn't it?
This is one of the biggest companies in the world, and this is where you suddenly realise the game is rigged in a lot of degrees and how much manipulation is happening, which is why I think the beauty of podcasts and the open forum for talk is beautiful, because it's something that is very rare now.
It also does this thing to our brains. So there's this professor, Robin Dunbar, and he has studied how people bond and how they form deeper relationships. And he uses this idea that you start off as a stranger, you then enter a different circle of an acquaintance, you then enter a different circle of being a friend, a close friend, a best friend, like family. So you end up going through these circles, these concentric circles that our brain has different storage points for. And essentially, the person who is a friend or an acquaintance has clocked up 7 hours with you in the last 90 days, something like that. And if you've clocked up 7 hours with someone, especially if they've been sort of like conversational and positive, then you know their name, you know their face, you know what they're about. Now, the long form podcast is essentially like when someone's listening to a Joe Rogan, Donald Trump, they're actually becoming friends with Joe Rogan and Donald Trump. So as far as the human brain knows, it's like, oh, these are my new friends. I'm actually adopting them into a new circle of influence for me. Now that only happens, according to the research, through a process of spending time together. You can't do it through short form. You can't do it through ads. It's different. So like quick little ads don't do it. Little social media posts don't do it. It's long form content that makes you deeply connected to someone.
With that being said, do you think the era of paid advertising on social media platforms is coming to an end, or is going to have a lot of challenges maybe in the next few years?
Google did some research, and I forget, I'll have to look it up, but if you search Google messy middle, and I think it's how people buy in 2024 or something like that, but it's basically they identify this concept called the messy middle. So we used to think of a buying journey as top of funnel, mid funnel, and bottom of funnel. And I hate the word funnel because like humans are humans and we don't like to be funneled towards things, but you get the concept. Top of funnel is awareness, and then trust building, and then monetization, sales, conversion, right? So it's kind of like awareness, trust, conversion type, top of funnel, middle funnel, bottom of funnel. And Google basically said there was this school of thought for a long time that you just moved people through that funnel. And then they actually went to see if it was still working and still happening, and they said it doesn't work anymore. So what happens is we have a top of funnel experience, which is typically an ad. We discover something. Then we enter what Google calls the messy middle, and this is where we just go on a random journey. And then once we've done a bunch of random stuff that's totally unpredictable, we end up at some point buying something, and it's very, very hard to track a straight line to it. So what that might look like is I might see your ad on Instagram and you're directly talking about what you do and how you do it and all that sort of stuff. I might just clock who you are and see your face and see a little bit about you. I might follow your Instagram, but I might not respond and I might not do anything for weeks. And then I notice that you're doing a long podcast. I'll listen to the podcast. Now I'm like on a different platform. I'm on Spotify and I'm listening to a long podcast. Then I'm like, oh, okay, I like this guy.